Hello, class. Welcome to Chapter 5, Stressors, Sources, and Reactions. In this chapter, we're going to talk about stressors, the effects on our psychological experiences, our physiological, all of the above. But we're going to start with challenges, which is the experience of I have homework to do, I have things to do, but I have a sense of competency in how I am doing it. Where are stressors that are challenges that are not met or immediately resolved, and those are the ones that actually lead to us having physiological and mental illnesses, right? So you have acute, which is short in duration, which could be, hey, I lost my job, but then I found another one, or chronic, which is long in duration, which could be someone that grew up in a abusive home and now goes through life and has uh, physiological and ongoing toxic relationships. So chronic is long in duration. They're usually unwanted, right? Can be physical. Like if people are sick, they're very creaky, right? You have an injury, it's very hot, it's extremely cold, or our physiological needs, if you can remember from Maslow's hierarchy, are not met, then that causes a strain. Can be psychosocial, our interpersonal relationships, demands of work and school, having too much homework, and self-imposed. We are our own worst critics. We can turn around and say, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, or this has to be better. So we can actually do a lot of stressful experiences based on what our thought processes and life experiences are. So if left unresolved, they can lead to physical and mental disorders. So, and they go together. So someone who has anxiety and depression often experiences fatigue. Uh, you can have all kinds of headaches, stomach aches, all of the above can happen from us having, sorry, this is distracting, having too much uh, stress on us. Okay, let's see if I can focus. So reactions, we've all seen those people, screaming and yelling, and then they're just coming at you. And then it puts us in a backup mode. Somebody's screaming at you, it makes you back up. Now we can have a cathartic crying episode, which could be reactive, but it is also good for us to release the stress when we are crying. And then what we would want to do is move it from that dysregulated state, dissimilar from somebody screaming, and then try and bring some meaning to it so they could process. There's a loss of something, a job or something. They have this uncontrollable crying episode, and then they can hopefully be in therapy and then learn the meaning behind the crying. Because crying isn't a bad thing. Or having any kind of dysregulation isn't. It's just not desirable when we're communicating with other people or looking for meaning. And then in responses, we're reflective. So we can actually say, okay, I want to communicate I statements. I feel like I don't matter to my employer, to things like that. And in reflective statements, we are more effective communicators and we can be heard. So ideally in therapy or in mindfulness or in processing, which our textbook is very good at, we would move from dysregulated to reflective because we want to be heard in our communications and we want to have meaning linked to things and life experiences. So it's acute for animals, right? They either are out there and they are killed and eaten, or they may eat, but that's a sympathetic nervous system overactive state, right? It's very fight, flight, freeze, right? And so when the threat is over, it goes away. But for most humans, it is psychological, or psychosocial. And what neuroscientists have found is that we are living in moderate levels of stress so much that we're actually making ourselves sick because we're not going from the fight, flight, freeze sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic. We're living in low levels of sympathetic. So we want this class is my aspiration is that you learn self-care, mindfulness, all of this stuff so that we can actually learn how to get to that parasympathetic. That would be meditating, mindfulness, breathing, therapy, replenishing relationships. So you have the general adaptation syndrome, right? Which is the nervous system, that fight or flight goes into survival mode. So in the alarm stage, your body's preparing to react, right? You're walking down the street, it's a dark night, you see people coming, you don't know if it's safe or not. You maybe take out your phone and say, "Do I need to call the police? I have my pepper spray." You go into a prepared reactive state. And in the resistance stage, we're acting defensively. Now we're calling 911, maybe, using the pepper spray. We're going to do what? Possibly fight or flight. And the exhaustion stage is chronic. And what happens is our defense system gets exhausted. Our immune system is exhausted, and it leads to illnesses and possibly death. On a lesser level, I see this with students. At the last week of school, they have 4 finals at one time, papers due, and it's just one thing after another. And so what happens is students come in with colds and flu-like symptoms because they have exhausted themselves and did not get to replenish, and now the immune system's compromised. We have negative stress, right? So unwanted negative stimuli, loud noises, uh, just intrusiveness on our psyche, right? People coming at us, and then hyper stress, way too much stimulation. So you have 5 papers due, 5 people talking to you at one time, bright lights, loud music. It's just hyper coming at you, and it's overstimulating. And then we have hassles, minor annoyances and irritations. This is traffic, long lines, things that are just irritating, right? And then hypo stress is too little stimulation. So what happens? We get bored. Sometimes in boredom, we go to social media and there's a lot of negative information or bullying going on. So we might go from hypo stress to distress in an ineffective means of coping. Surprisingly, we have positive stress. You got a new job, you got accepted to your bachelor's program, you got accepted to graduate school. So it is something that is we're looking forward to that's positive, but it still activates that sympathetic nervous system. So it uplifts us and it's a positive momentary stimulation. And then we have people that are sensation seeking, roller coaster. Don't feel bad if you take roller coaster rides, but looking for high levels of sensation. Those that live in it all the time are actually exhausted. But so positive stress, if you can see this thing I added, it has something we can handle. So if you go to school, you look at the syllabus, you have all these assignments and you get them done, you develop a sense of competency, and that leads to more Euro stress experiences. So something's here, I got to do it, but I believe I can. And then distress is I don't think I can. So I actually think school is very good for us developing a sense of competency and good for our mental health because we navigate through it and continuously develop a sense of competency. So changes in our life, we have 4 different conflicting types. We have approach. So occurs when you have 2 desirable outcomes. Do I want to be a teacher? Do I want to be a psychologist? You have to decide between the two. Avoidance occurs when you have to choose between 2 unattractive outcomes. I often reference this to politics. I've heard people say, well, it's the lesser of the evils, right? But they don't like either choice. Approach avoidance exists when one event or goal has both attractive and unattractive features. So I got this great new job. It's going to pay well, but it's also another half hour away from home. The multiple approach avoidance. So you must choose between 2 or more things, each having desirable and undesirable. So I have to choose. I stay in a relationship. There's a lot of things that are really good about it, but there's things that I don't. Or I leave the relationship and I have the loss of not having the relationship, but getting rid of the undesirable features, all of which are empowering, right? So we go through life and these conflicts cause us to reflect on what matters to us and that like what I call that daydreaming state where we think about the different possible outcomes. And when you do that and you make a decision, there's a sense of resonance that you can say, oh, okay, I know that I'm going to still have to drive 20 minutes for this job, but I'm accepting that because the job seems so attractive. Or I'm going to stay in this relationship even though everything's not perfect, which nothing is, right? But we get a sense of acceptance and empowerment because we have navigated through a reflectiveness in the choices. So frustrations, lack of resources, right? Do I have enough money to pay my bills? Do I have all the things I need? If we go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, do we have what we need to get to the higher levels, right? Losses, it's not just losses of life around you, it's also losses of relationships, jobs, all of those things. Prejudice and discrimination is got a powerlessness to it because you apply for a job and there's prejudice and then you're discriminated against and you don't get the job. And what do you do? Do you hire an attorney? Like, what do you do about this? So, prejudice and discrimination are actually contributory to a higher risk of suicidality. For the LGBTQ plus community, it's at least a 25% higher suicide rate, not based on the fact that they say I'm gay, but based on the fact that society reacts to them in such a negative way. So your own personal beliefs are yours, right? But when before we say anything negative or unkind to somebody or try and impose our beliefs, we need to realize that we might be contributing to somebody else's mental distress. So types of pressures, environmental, we have smog in the air, we have heat, we have all this stuff going on, right? Psychological, relationships, social friendships, relationships and our own thought processes and our own self perceptions and life experiences that gets to that incorrect beliefs. I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. All of these things, right? So, and if you have negative family models where there was dysregulated communication, substances, or not a supportive environment, that's going to lead to the incorrect beliefs, but also there's gonna be no role modeling. Like, if you have people that are screaming at each other, they're not teaching their children how to be reflective in their communication. And I think I already discussed the irrational beliefs. So what happens? It affects our body, right? People come in and they have body aches and cramps and tics, and they have all kinds of physical symptoms linked to the psychological stressors that we have in life. And respiratory asthma, I remember being in graduate school and they said asthma, and I lived in the valley, and I'm like, oh, asthma's in the air. We go back to the environmental. But could you have an asthma attack as a result of stress? Yes. And then hyperventilation, like people having a panic attack. They can't breathe. It's very legitimate physiological response that they have. Very often as a therapist, I saw people with migraines, irritable bowel syndromes, tension headaches, hypertension, heart diseases. All of this stuff can happen as a resist or as a reaction to the stressors that we experience in manifestations and physiological symptoms. The immune system I just talked about, like with students during finals, but uh, neuro neurologists have actually done research on multi-generations of stress on the body. The immune system is the rheumatoid arthritis is an immune system disease. So we come into the world with a genetic predisposition for this because of multi-generations of stress that have transpired and changed the expression of our genes at birth. Um, Digestive, I already talked about people coming in with irritable bowel syndrome, diarrhea, stomach aches. We've all seen the kid that gets a stomach ache because they're stressed about going to school. The nervous system, reduced nerve cell growth and repair. So in this class, I may have already discussed neurons that fire together, wire together. So when you're meditating, when you go to sleep and you have a good night's sleep, the neurons and the activities of the day fire and then wire together. Well, stress does the opposite thing. It actually deteriorates our cell growth and it stops the repair from happening. So self care is crucial to us being higher functioning. And then we get stressed and we're lower functioning. Ironic. So reproductive systems, low sperm in males, difficulty getting pregnant. We've all seen those people that are trying to have a baby and they get so stressed and then they say, I'm just not going to try anymore. And then they get pregnant. Doesn't mean anybody who doesn't is stressed, but it does contribute to it. Skin reactions, hives, itching, eczema, all of these things can be related to stress. So chromosomes determine our body aging, and we have these things called telomeres. And at birth, if we have too short telomeres, these are also the serotonin transmitters. It's associated with having a higher risk for depression, but they're also responsible for body repair. And when we're stressed, not only do we have maybe too short telomeres, but we also have them start to deteriorate and get damaged. It is ridiculously important, and I hope this class, the essence of this textbook and the content in this class is to learn self-care so that we can prevent things like this. So we can have hormetic stress, which is a short-term stress that strengthens our body. So optimal levels of stress. The child that's learning how to walk has optimal levels of stress, they get the sense of competency. I keep saying competency because it's so important. But hey, I have this stress. I have to get this project done in my class. You get it done, and it helps you strengthen your body and your immune system, which is going to help you throughout your lifespan. So, stresses on cognitive functioning. I talked earlier about the toxic family environment. But if someone is screaming at you, you don't have the capacity. The brain is in a heightened state, as is the central nervous system. So you don't have this ability to remember things. Anybody who's even had test anxiety, you study, 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 you get in and you can't retrieve it. So remembering, planning, all of that kind of stuff is affected by our stress levels, right? Memorizing things. So the person who's screaming at their child and then says the next day, how come you're still doing that? It's because they were so scared they weren't able to retain that information. So the brain areas involved in emotions and this the hippocampus actually has atrophy. That's the part of the brain that stores memories when we have trauma or traumatic experiences. The amygdala that it's in the brain is the emotional memory. These are all in overactive states, and our stress hormones are there too. We have cortisol going crazy, right? And then as people age, it depresses our problem solving skills because of the longevity of the chronic stress. So anger can be justified, right? And I don't really know that we should go through life and tell people it's not okay to get angry. It's what you do with it. You don't want to become violent, but anger fosters the no response. If we feel like somebody treated us poorly, you're in a toxic relationship and you get angry and leave that relationship, it facilitates a no response, which could really be healthy, just how we express it. If it's uncontrolled, then it's angry temper tantrums, all this stuff that could lead to consequences. And then fear is caused by unknown threat stressors. So you are afraid, if we go back to earlier, of a possible threat of someone following you down the street at night, right? And anxiety is just worrying. And the thing is that all of this stuff is associated with negative. But if someone is worrying, instead of us telling them not to worry about it, because that actually doesn't help at all, we might want to say, what is the worrying telling you? I'm worried I'm not a good enough student. What is that telling you? It's telling you that self care requires that you work on looking at yourself and developing a sense of competency. So, anxiety and worry kind of come together, like focus on the worry and then the anxiety. I actually say the work of the worry. What are you telling me when we're having some kind of experience that's undesirable? What are you trying to tell me that I need to pay attention to? Okay. Guilt, stress from violating one's own values. So I'm going to say one's own values and others. So if we hurt somebody, we should absolutely feel remorse, right? Because that's just compassionate. But if we feel guilt because we've said no to something, is that actually healthy and that we're saying no? And the guilt feeling is like kind of telling us we feel bad that we're disappointing somebody, right? Remember how the anger is learning how to say no? Well, we're going to maybe disappoint somebody. So, what's that telling us? That we maybe have to learn to accept ourselves, that other people are disappointed. Depression from loss or or an inability to move. You know, as a clinician, I saw people in debilitating states of depression. They can't get off the couch. But what you can see is people that are very high functioning. They go to work, they go to school, they do everything they need to, but then they just crash. And then they say no to someone. No, I don't want to participate in a social event, and then feel guilty about it. But depression sometimes is telling us, hey, I'm fatigued and I need to pay attention to what it is that's making me not feel good right now. Grief, feelings of sadness from loss, it's not just death, it's relationships, it's not getting the job, it's disappointments in life from things that we had hoped for. And there is a difference between loneliness and being alone, right? Loneliness is unwanted separation from meaningful relationships. Meaningful relationships are replenishing, even with the good and the bad. They are like we have some place to go and we can share, but loneliness is not having that. Sometimes being alone can actually be replenishing so that we can be available for people and we don't feel guilty for not saying no. Many stress reactions are learned, right? So if you grow up in that toxic environment, you have, uh, you know, adults that are dysregulated. How is the person supposed to learn how to regulate and control? The question wouldn't be why aren't they? The question would be why would they? They didn't have that role modeling in front of them. So this textbook really does discuss mindfulness, therapy, humanistic psychology, all of this stuff to help us learn to move from reactive to reflective and learn better coping skills. One of the best ways we can learn better coping skills is to accept this is a dysregulated state. I have feelings of depression and anxiety. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a life experience. It's unpleasant. I'm not going to push it away. I'm going to ask it why it's here to tell me what I need to do to take care of myself. And in chapter 6, we will discuss how to handle these stressors.